Okay, hello guys, welcome to today's video. So in today's video, we talk about specificity, cascade, and also inheritance. So what we have here is on the left, we have our HTML page. That's the web page where we have a text that says I am a p tag. Then on the right top or the right top corner, we have the CSS file, which has a p selector, that is the element selector, which has been given the property of color red. So that's what's giving this the red color. Okay. So, and below we also have the HTML page. So in this HTML page, we have a simple styling where there is a p tag, that is this. Sorry, there is a p tag with a class of para and the contents of I am a p tag, which is showing over here at the top. And also it's inside a div tag, right? So this is very simple. Okay. Okay, let me begin by showing you how the inheritance works. Okay. So with this example, I'd like to add a few more things. So on top of this, I'll bring the div selector. So I'm selecting the div and I'm giving it a color, right? A color of blue. So let's see what's supposed to happen. Okay. So for now, this p tag is having a color of red because the p tag has a red color inside the styles. But if I take this off, what happens? Now the p tag here is having a color of blue. But we've removed the style for the p tag. So how come it's showing blue over here? Okay, this is where inheritance comes in. So if you look down here in the HTML page, let me increase the size a bit. Okay, so there is a div tag, right? And this div tag has been given a color of blue, and it is the parent element of the p tag. So the p tag is its child. So this is when the inheritance comes in. So for properties like color, once it's given to a parent, like the div tag, it can be inherited by the children if the children's color or the children's property, such as the color, has not been specified. So in this case, the parent's color has been specified for the div tag, which is blue. But for the child, it has no color. So it's going to be given the color of the parent. So that's what the inheritance is all about. But once the child also decides to get its own color, it overrides the inheritance. So I could make this color of red. So once I do that, it overrides the inheritance. It makes it red. But if I take it out, or I type in inherit here, so you can also specify the color to be inherit. So once I do that, it inherits the parent's color, right? Cool. Okay, so similar to the inherit value, there are other values that goes with the color, which can alter its inheritance property. So let me go over these. So these are, first of all, is inherit. Then there is also initial. Then there is also onset. Then revert. So we've covered the initial already. Sorry, we've covered the inherit already. So let's remove this. So now let's look at how initial works. So let's remove the other ones as well. Okay, so what the initial does is it goes back to its default value. So in this case, the color. So we know the default value of the color for the p tag is not blue. We are getting this blue because it's getting it from its parent, right? But what if we don't want this and we want to set it to its default? So that's where the initial comes in. So once you specify it to be initial, let's see. If I save this and refresh, the p tag's color goes back to its initial value. So the initial value or the default value is black, right? So it goes back to its initial. So it's as simple as that. So now let's look at onset. So with the onset, what it does is whatever value the p tag has been given, it wipes it off and takes the value of its parent, or if there is no value for the parent, then it just takes the default value. So in this case, we could do something like this. So I could give it a class. Okay, there's a class already of para, right? Then p. So I'll give it a color of red. Okay, so for now, let me take this out from the para. So what this code means is the parent has a color of blue, but the child also has a color of red. So it's going to take the child's color, right? So this is going to be red. Okay, and it's red now. Then, since the p tag that we are working on has a class of para, we can also specify the color over here. So if maybe for this p tag, which has a class of para, I don't want the red on it. I want to unset the red color. So that's what this does. It removes the color it has on the particular element. So for this, the color is red, but if I type unset, it means for the color specified for this p tag, since the para is on the p tag, it removes whatever color it has, right? So once it removes whatever color it has, it goes back to check what other color is there apart from the color that has been removed. So the color that has been removed from by specifying onset is red. So since I've specified onset, the red has been removed, right? So what color is there? The color blue, right? Why? Because the div is its parent container. So it's going to inherit the blue from its parent because the red color has been unsetted. So let me just save and refresh. It takes on blue, right? But what if the blue is not there over here? So let me just remove this. So now we have a p tag of red, but in the para, we don't want the red anymore. So we unset the red color, right? So now the web page will go for a color that is available. So since there is no color on the parent container, which is the div tag, then it goes to check what the default value is for a paragraph tag in terms of the color. So that is black. So once it's unsetted, it just picks the default value for the p tag, which is black. So let me save it and refresh. So right now the p tag in the web page is black, right? Cool. So now we've seen how onset works. Now let's see how the revert works. Okay, so let's bring back our div tag here and make it blue. So the color of any tag inside should be blue. Okay. So we set the p tag also to red. Right? We set the div tag color to blue, the p tag to red, then the p tag with a para class, we revert its color. So let's say the revert is not there. What do we get? We get a red color over here. Let's bring back the, okay, let me type it back. So para, right? And the value of the color should be revert, right? So revert, just as the word suggests, it goes back to the color that was there before, right? So the color that was there before the red is blue, since the blue is a parent tag. So with the revert also, it ignores the current value for the element and it checks what's there next to the color that it has already. So in this case, it's blue. So that's it for the inherit, revert, onset, and initial. Okay, so now let's move on to the cascade. Okay, so over here in our CSS, we've changed the styles a bit, and now the color of the p tag, we've made it green. So it's now showing in our web page here. So the color is green, right? So I can go back to my CSS page or my CSS file, then specify the color to be blue, right? Once I save this and refresh, well, it's not changing to blue. I've kept refreshing, but it's not changing to blue. But why is that? You see, these are both p tags. So the machine has to pick, the site has to pick, the web has to pick one of these colors, which is either blue or green. So how does the computer decide which one to pick? So it checks from the top. It assigns the value of blue, but it also sees that there is another p tag here and assigns the value of green again. So because of this, the green gets assigned last. That's why that's how come we see the blue. Sorry, that's how come we see the green color here, right? So the same way, if we copy this and bring the blue down again, it's going to assign blue. So it first assigns blue first, then green, then blue. So you could do that on and on, but it wouldn't make sense. Normally in a CSS file where there are hundreds of lines of CSS code, you might make a mistake by bringing two of the same tags and making a mistake of assigning different values like this, like blue and green. So in that case, it will pick the very last one and ignore the ones before, right? So that's simple as that. So that's what the cascade is about. Then from the cascade, we move on to specificity. Okay, so I've changed the styles once again, and the p tag has a color of green now, and it only has this selector, so there is no conflict in terms of cascading, right? So now the p tag has a color of green, but we could also select this using the class selector. So in this case, let me also add the ID selector here. Down here, you add an ID selector, which you see, um, let me just write my name over there because I don't know what to write there. So now the p tag, right, obviously has an element of p So you can select using the P element, you can select using the class selector, and you can select using the ID selector, right? So you can select it in 3 ways. So what if you select using all of these ways? So let's see how this works. And this is what specificity is all about. So let's see how it works. So first of all, you have green. So this is very understandable. Then secondly, we have para. So we are selecting using the class, but we've already selected using the element name. But we are also going to select using the class. So we specify the color to be red, right? So the class selector is more specific than the element selector, meaning it's going to pick the class selector over the element selector, right? So it has to pick this, meaning the color has to be red. And this doesn't matter the position of the class, unlike the cascading. So I can put the class on top, the class selector on top, and maybe change this to purple, right? And it will still pick the class selector over the element selector since it's more specific. And the same thing applies for the ID selector. So I could make this, sorry, the ID name we gave was my name, and we could give this a color of blue, right? Or red. I think blue is fine. So we give this a color of blue, and now it turns it to blue because the blue is more specific, or the ID selector is more specific than the class selector and the element selector, right? That's why it's selecting the color of blue. Okay, so for the selectors we've seen so far, the ID selector has the highest specificity. So once you specified an element selector, a class selector, and an ID selector, it chooses the ID over anyone else. But let's see this example. I could specify a p tag, which also has an ID of Yoshi. Then I give it a color of blue, right? So this and this are selecting the very same element, but one has more power over the other because of specificity. And let me refresh and we see which one. Okay, let me refresh. Okay, so it has made it blue. That means it's selecting this over this. Why? Because this has a greater, the one below with a p tag and the attribute name and the ID name Yoshi has a higher specificity over just the one with the ID name of Yoshi. Because once you calculate its specificity, it's higher than the one with just Yoshi. So how do you calculate this? So let's see in the next image, I'll bring how we could calculate this specificity. Okay, so on how to calculate the specificity, this is a small table that I have here. So on the top, we have the ID selector, the class selector, element selector. So if any of these belong to the above, you'll be given a value of 1. So once you finish calculating it, then you find the entire value over here. So let's see how this works. So for the first one, we have an element selector, which is the p tag. So since it's not an ID selector, it gives it a value of 0. It's not a class selector, so it gives it a value of 0. and it's an element selector, it gives it a value of 1. So you have 001, so the value is 1. So for the next one, we have the paragraph or the para class selector. So with this one, we have an ID selector of 0. We have a class, it's a class selector, so class selector is going to be equal to 1. And there is no element selector, so we are going to have 0, 1, 0, 10. So obviously 10 is greater than 1. So the class selector is always going to be selected over the element selector. So let's see the next one. So we have an ID selector. So with this, we have 1 for the ID selector, then 0 for the class selector, and 0 for the element selector. So we have 100 or 100. And this is greater than any of these. So it's going to be selected before these two. Then, sorry. Then we have the P element selector, which is 1 over here for the element selector. Then the ID selector, which is 1. And there is no class selector, so there is 0 here. So this will give 101, sorry. So 101, which is greater than this. So it will be chosen over this. So far, this is the greatest of them all. Then lastly, we have this element selector and a class selector. So lastly, we have the element selector and the class selector. So with this, there is no ID selector. So the ID selector is 0, the class selector is 1, and the element selector is also 1. So we have 0, 1, 1, which is 11. So for this, it's not greater than these two, since they both have the ID selector, but it's greater than just the class selector and just the element selector. Okay, so that's how to calculate for the specificity.
In the next video, we'll be practicing our CSS by building something with what we've learned so far.